question again, because I think we have to back up a little bit for the sake of, we're not
It wasn't
entirely sure
painful
when
enough
we
for
lost
everybody
connection.
the first time.
You had a question, you had a question about the accessory structure and the height.
Okay, I think I'll do the shortened version. So
Yeah.
my question was regarding the 8 meters that was set out for the, to permit an accessory structure of 8 meters. And the statement that was made previous to that was that you weren't sure what the accessory structure was going to be, and that the current plan does not give a clear definition of what the barn structure should or shouldn't be, and so there's still some uncertainty in what you're looking for, or what you will be able to achieve, correct?
Microphone?
Every time. Incidentally, when I'm on Zoom, I usually don't have an issue with accidentally being on mute. But apparently in person I do. So through you, Mr. Chair, in the bylaw, it does exempt height for barns. There's no clear indication of what constitutes a barn. Is it how it looks and all that sort of thing? And so because we're still speccing exactly how it'll be constructed, we wanted to have that clarity of we can actually build a barn-style structure without running into an issue with regards to height. And the current structure that is roughly in this location, but a little bit closer to the road, is about 7 to 9 meters, depending on where you measure that height. So there is already that structure that's 8 meters, roughly in the same location, very far set back into the property with adequate buffer from trees as well. And so it's not, it wouldn't be impactful, it wouldn't be much of a difference really from what's currently there. It's just to give us that additional comfort and to save us from having to come back again with the exact same, more or less ask, but potentially having additional details about exactly what it looks like.
Okay, yeah, and that helps, thank you. And the previous discussion that we had regarding another replacement barn, I think was the previous discussion, was that was also set at 8 meters, was it? Is that the other structure that's?
I cannot recall off the top of my head the replacement structure of the Allen Park barn.
Right.
It was a reclaimed barn. I know the height was identified on the submission, but because in our discussions it was exempt due to the policy for barns, it was a reclaimed barn, so we knew for sure that it would be appropriate. That was not a consideration. We didn't need to ask for a specific height exemption, but I don't recall off the top of my head exactly what that height is.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's enough.
Oh, Councillor Sullivan, you've had time to think.
Thank you. Can you just clarify, please, the use for this building, which is replacing the barn that's falling down, right, or past its shelf life? It's defined as going to be a hobby mill?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the two structures, the uses will be a hobby mill, a rural home occupation, and then the other structure will be for family space as well as storage.
Okay. And because we have previously had an issue with hobby mill and excessive amount of noise, so I just want to be sure that we're not going to run into that same situation. So this is not for commercial operation at all?
No, absolutely not. So this was something that was raised to us as well. We are aware of that situation, and so we did confirm with the client that the tools and machinery that's used is very specific to just a rural home occupation, not a commercial mill.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to take the precaution to read the resolution again, and then we'll ask for a mover and a seconder. Be it resolved that Council approve and enact Bylaw 101-21 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw for lands located at 4100 County Road 43 from the Mineral Aggregate Preservation Zone to the Rural Special Exemption RU-62 zone to recognize the existing legal non-conforming rural uses in an appropriate rural zone, limit an accessory structure footprint aggregate area to 5% of the total lot coverage within the established RU 62 zone and permit an accessory structure height of 8 meters. Moved by, somebody move it, thank you. Councillor O'Sullivan, and seconded by Councillor Stracker-Yan. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a comprehensive bylaw change regarding, and a zoning bylaw amendment regarding County Road 43. What's the address here? Do we have an address for this? Who's presenting this? Crystal? There is no civic address, is that correct? There's just a lot number? Okay. Go ahead, you can present that. Okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Barclay. So the application, this is an application that came forward for public meeting last meeting, September 15th, 2021. It was for file ZBA-12-21, and these are for lands that are located just northeast of the County Road 43 Pine Hill Road intersection. So to refresh your memory, at that meeting, the application was presented, and the application is looking to rezone a portion of the site to a highway commercial zone, and this is to permit and facilitate future commercial uses. Next slide, please. So this is the location that we're looking at, and you can jump to the next one for me. So the zoning bylaw proposed amendment that's before you would look to rezone the hatched area on that map to the now it's a special highway commercial zone with a special exception, and there's a holding on it, and that holding symbol would be there until a site plan control application or site plan control agreement is executed, and also all of their servicing and capacity allocation is sorted out. Next slide, please. Okay, so at the last public meeting, there was some concern raised by the agent of the applicant that there was an environmental protection zoning that was placed on the property, and that was there in relation to a watercourse that was just to the east of the property. And that environmental protection zone was being placed there at the recommendation of Rideau Valley Conservation as a condition of them supporting the application. So in the meantime, between the public meeting and now, staff were able to work with both parties, and we were able to come to an amendment that satisfied both parties and also meets all of the applicable policies that staff required. Next slide, please. So at that meeting, there was no public comment that was received. There was just the discussion between the agent in relation to the Rideau Valley Conservation comments. So based on what's before you now, it's a recommendation that both are satisfied with. Next slide. And for here, so it changed. Now there's a special exception zone that speaks specifically to a setback, and it relates back to the existing watercourse setbacks that are in the general provisions. So it still places that setback on the watercourse, and it also speaks to that setback remaining in a natural vegetative state, so it provides the function that Rideau Valley Conservation Authority was looking for. Next slide. So based off of that information, staff recommend that council approve and enact bylaw 8421 to facilitate future commercial uses on the subject lands. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question about the solution that's come up that satisfies the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. Could you go back to, Jessica, to, no, you had the slide there. It was that, yep, okay. That's the roundabout just to the east that leads into Food Basics, and there's a designated road that runs along the property line, the east property line. So we're looking at 15 meters setback to protect the watercourse that runs along the property line. Is that road? I mean, would a 15 meters setback also apply to construction of that road?
So the request came from the agent
Yep.
because there is potential that that watercourse may be moved over the whatever is being proposed on the subject lands and also any of the neighboring properties. So what that allows us to do is that setback will apply to wherever that watercourse exists. But there's potential that it may not, when all is said and done, that watercourse end up along that eastern property line. So potentially it may not, if there is a road there, it won't apply to that.
So what would happen to that watercourse? Would it become part of a sewer line? Not sewer line, but stormwater sewer?
I'm not entirely sure. They would have to go through Rideau
Okay.
Valley Conservation for a permit through their regulation,
Right.
which could potentially move it.
Okay, so that setback, just refresh my memory from the September 15th, I think it was, meeting. Is that 15 meters greater or less than what was originally proposed? Do you
It's
recall?
the same distance.
It's the same.
Yes, all we're doing is using a new mechanism to provide the same function that was before you in September.
So, and that new mechanism is putting a holding symbol on it?
No, the new mechanism is the special exception zone. So instead of using the EP zone, we're using the watercourse setbacks that are outlined in the general provisions.
Okay. Ms. Martin, you've come up to the table. I'm sure you have something to say.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention in regard to any future impact on that watercourse, my understanding is that based on its location, it would more than likely have to be removed, and there would have to be a compensation plan put in place for the removal of that watercourse should that unopened road allowance ever be developed as a road. And that would be done in coordination with Rideau Valley.
Okay, so the future road that is sketched out here would be subject to Rideau Valley as well?
That is correct, and my understanding in conversations with the Director of Public Works is that any future development of that road allowance, there would have to be a compensation plan in regard to the impacts on the watercourse that's existing.
And by compensation, you're just meaning some plan where that water goes rather than along that watercourse. Is that what you mean?
There'd have to be, sorry, Your Chair, there'd have to be a plan as to how you would not necessarily reinstate, but you would provide other enhancements elsewhere. Because the impact would be that you would be negatively impacting that water course, whether it's by completely removing it or altering it significantly. So a compensation plan could apply to another area within the municipality where you provide or enhance an environmental feature.
Somewhere else?
Somewhere else. Yeah.
Okay. One final question is, when you say water course, is that just a road ditch? Or it's conveying water from the property to the south?
Yes, so typically, for this instance, it could look like a road ditch. Typically, if that road ditch is connected to other properties where water is flowing through, you can have water courses that connect up to our road ditches and then continue on through. So it's draining water from other properties and sending it through. So it's a water course running through potentially a road ditch.
Okay. I said it was a final question, but I got another question. And that is, I imagine the future life of this water course would be subject to our stormwater master plan that's planned for next year. That would give some context about what's done with that water course? Or would it provide some restrictions? I know this is a question for Director Dunlop rather than yourself, but it's related to planning.
So in regards to that question as to the stormwater master plan, I would defer that matter to Director Dunlop. We have taken note of it, and we will follow up with her, and we can follow up with you, Councillor Barkley, in regards to that question, as it is outside of the parameters of this application, but I do understand your line of questioning leading to what would be entailed within that report.
Thank you. Council colleagues? Go ahead.
Thank you. I understood that from the traffic circle there, that road allowance going north is already in place, that land is already there dedicated to be a roadway. So maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was going to be a road that would access some of the planned building that's north of that. And so does the watercourse need to be moved in order for that road to continue on there, or is the watercourse currently on this subject land right now?
So through the chair to Councillor O'Sullivan, I'm not sure of that answer. So for this application, it's beyond the scope of what I reviewed in terms of their ask for rezoning to a commercial use. So that would be applicable to that property that is neighboring this one, but I'm not sure what the road plans for that road in relation to the watercourse are. But I do know that this property in relation to the watercourse, that solution has been agreed upon by the agent and the Conservation Authority to move forward with the proposed bylaw amendment that's before you.
Okay, so just for my own clarification, so if we approve this and that front portion is amended to be highway commercial, regardless of whether the watercourse remains on that property or not, it's not going to change this application. They may still have the watercourse and still have those setbacks of 15 meters from the bank, regardless.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Strachan, go ahead.
I need some definitions. So a watercourse is a naturally occurring feature? Is that correct?
It doesn't necessarily have to be. It's a depression in the ground where surface water generally or seasonally travels through.
In this case, it's naturally occurring because that has not been disturbed, or has this been already rerouted?
I can't confirm that. Do you know?
If I can weigh in here, there is a distinction between a watercourse and a natural watercourse. So, for example, you know, a roadway ditch is a watercourse, but it's not a natural watercourse, as far as I understand.
Through the chair to Councillor Strachan, in regards to whether it has been previously diverted, it is a rather meandering watercourse and it crosses many properties. I wouldn't have that answer at this time as to whether or not there's been development on other properties where that watercourse is present, to be able to give you that answer as to if it's already been impacted by other development. But it is an answer that we can definitely follow up on and provide some clarification. It just would require a review of other properties in the area where the watercourse runs through.
Okay, and so based on the previous statement that you made, though, regarding that the current zoning and that watercourse, that the zoning doesn't entirely protect that watercourse because of compensation plan that would have to be put in place should the other roadway come, be brought up for development and so on, that the watercourse, I guess my question is that is there any protection for a watercourse, or is it simply being assessed as if it's no different than a ditch for the passage of water?
So the setback there that is in the general provisions, that 15 meters, it sometimes is also 30 meters, that setback is there to protect all of our watercourses across the municipality. There is no difference on this site versus any other site where that 15 meters would apply. If that watercourse remains in the location it is now, it is protected from any development because we do have that setback there. And we also have it listed in this amendment that it will remain in a vegetative state. So it's a buffer and there should be no development within that area. So should they leave it as is and provide us with a site plan application, they do need to follow that 15 meters and they would need to be stay out of that setback. Anything beyond that, they would require approvals from the Conservation Authority. It would need to be reviewed for us through site plan application. So any alterations or impacts to that watercourse would come before you in subsequent applications.
Does this water course, I think maybe, Ms. Martin, you already responded to some of this, but do we know if this connects to water course, across from the street or anything like that, like where this continues from here? I don't know if we have an actual map of that full water course or not, but.
Let's see if I can get this to work here. Yeah, so I'll do my best to explain how it works. And if council recalls, Mr. Batchelor from the RVCA was here at the last meeting and provided an explanation as to the location of the watercourse. So from a northerly perspective, here it is. The watercourse runs up into what we call the northwest quadrant. There are unevaluated wetlands, and there's been extensive studies that we've done in regards to the wetland features in this area. And my understanding is that it does run along the roadway and it comes down across the property.
Okay, thank you.
So in a nutshell, the solution that was provided was putting a holding symbol on to protect that vegetative buffer, and that wasn't present before. Have I captured the difference between? No? Okay, thank you.
The amendment that's been proposed, we've removed the environmental protection zoning and we've listed a specific setback in a special provision specific for this site that puts the details as to the required setback for that watercourse.
With the approval of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority? Or
Correct.
With their
Should
knowledge?
they go beyond anything that's listed there currently.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions? No, okay. And I hadn't read it. Okay, I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that Council approve and enact Bylaw 84-21 to amend the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw, Bylaw 50-12, to amend the lands legally described as part of Lot 25, Concession 2, from rural to highway commercial holding, C3-H, and rural to conform with the municipal official plan and facilitate future commercial uses. And I'll look to Councillor O'Sullivan to move it. And I'll be looking for a seconder somewhere. There we go. Councillor Starker, thank you. Any further discussion before I call the vote? Nope. Okay, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. And people will be glad to hear that we're moving on to Official Plan Amendment 3-19 and Zoning Bylaw Amendment 15-19, and Director Martin is presenting that to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the Cornwall Gravel as request to amend the designation on a portion of the property known as the future South Gore Pit. It's located at the intersection of Bennett Road and County Road 22. Is before Council tonight, as well as the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone a portion of the property to permit an extractive pit on a portion of the lot. There's been extensive discussion over this file dating back to our first public meeting in March of 2020, and at the previous council meeting it came back before council. for further discussion and for an attempt to see if we could get some sort of resolution or at least a decision on the file. Based off that council meeting, it was directed that the application be sent back out to the public in regards to informing them that the item was back on the agenda for council's consideration. So as part of that, staff reached out to the individuals who attended the original meeting back on March 4th in 2020 to inform them that this file had arisen back on the agenda, provided them with the information from the September 15th meeting, but to also inform them of a public information session that Cornwall Gravel was hosting virtually on October 6th of 2021, where they would have their experts to address any outstanding questions. I know that the September agenda, the report provided an update on the wetland features, and Mr. Batchelor from the RVCA was also here to address the RVCA's comments, which they now are satisfied that this matter can be considered fully by council, and that the items that they were had initially provided concern around have been addressed adequately. So to that end, Cornwall Gravel did provide a letter which was attached to the council report addressing the comments that were originally provided at the March meeting, as well as addressing the comments from council from last week. So that was provided for council's consideration as they contemplate the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. Through discussions with the applicant, and I will note that the applicant is here this evening and they have brought their expert team with them to answer questions that council may have in regards to the technical reports. There were items that were raised at the last council meeting that required their experts to provide a response. So any questions that you may have that may be unresolved, they are here tonight to take and field your questions. But Cornwall Gravel has requested that council consider this application this evening and form a decision. So I wanted to provide council that in regards to Planning Act applications, you have three options. One is to approve an amendment. The second is to not approve an amendment. And the third one is you can continue to defer the matter. And what I wanted to raise is that under the Planning Act, there are certain timelines that when council does not make a decision and they're exceeded, in this case under the Planning Act, we have 180 days to consider an official plan amendment, and it's 90 days for a zoning bylaw amendment. When those timelines are exceeded, the applicant has the ability to appeal the non-decision of council. So that is something that should a decision not be made tonight, that the applicant, as the application was originally approved as deemed complete back on November 27th, 2019. Now granted, that was pre-pandemic and a lot has happened, but they are within their full rights, should they have no decision this evening, to appeal that decision. So I will, at this point, turn it back to you, Chair, as to whether or not you would like to invite the technical experts to address any of the outstanding comments that council may have in regards to the wetland features and how they're addressing items. But prior to considering the resolution before you this evening.
Thank you, Director Martin. I have two questions that probably you can answer before. You said 180, in terms of timelines, 180 days for a official plan amendment, 90 days for a zoning bylaw amendment to appeal a non-decision? Did you say non-decision or any decision?
So under the Planning Act, Chair, there are certain provisions. So when a zoning amendment is passed by council, anyone, and it lists out who can object. So if you provided written comment of objection or you came to a public meeting and objected, you would have the right to appeal a positive decision on a bylaw to the, what is now called the Ontario Land Tribunal. It used to be the LPAT, the OMB. Every couple of years they reinvent their name. then in the case of, say, council chose not to support the application, then the applicant would be able to appeal the decision of council. And in the case of a non-decision, and the reasoning why there is this mechanism built into the official plan was so that municipalities could not just sit on not making a decision and applicants are just left with no recourse. It allows them the ability that should council just not make a decision on the file, they can appeal it to the Ontario Land Tribunal, who will then make a decision on the application before them.
Second question that possibly you can answer is, did any staff attend the public information meeting hosted by Cornwall Gravel on the 6th? And if they did, do we have any idea of who attended? Or how many people attended?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, the staff did not attend the session, and it is my understanding through an update email from Mr. Mitchell that nobody signed up or registered to attend the event. So the members of the public were provided with an opportunity and they did not attend.
And by members of the public, you mean the people who came to the original meeting back in, well, I forget when the original meeting, it has been a long time since it's been before us, right? Yeah.
Yes,
in
that is
attendance, it wasn't a general public notice.
That is correct, Chair. The intent was to provide an opportunity for the individuals who had raised concerns at the original March meeting, at March 4th, 2020, to further address it with the technical experts. And just a note, this is above and beyond Planning Act requirements. They weren't required to do this, but my understanding is based on the feedback from council, the September 15th meeting, they wanted to provide that opportunity to those who were interested in attending. Yeah,
and I would commend Cornwall Gravel for hosting that additional meeting that they weren't obliged to do, but I think given the discussions previously, it was a very smart move on their part, and I'm surprised that none of the people who were objecting to this zoning bylaw amendment attended, so I'm surprised that maybe fatigue set in or COVID fear, who knows. I do have a question that might apply to one of the experts, so stay close, because this question might involve you as well.
Might I recommend I may move over to a seat over here, so that would allow for the expert team to come down and take up the space and directly address council, and I can be on the, I guess, the wings, as you would call it, to answer any municipal questions.
By all means, great suggestion. So I don't know if my council colleagues have questions, but I have one question related to the large environmental protection zone that skirts the, I guess that's the southern, or is that the western part of the property, the subject property? I don't have my directions here. I guess, oh yeah, so it would be the western part, or I stand corrected. There's a very large environmental protection zone that crosses part of the property. And my question regards, and I believe that environmental protection zone, part of it drains into the Barnes Creek, which eventually flows into the Kempful Creek and the Rideau River. So my concern is about drainage, whether there's legal and adequate outlet for increased capacity as the pit is enlarged or is expanded, whether, drainage concerns are with a change in the zone, the change in the use of the property or expansion of that use, I'm a little concerned about how that affects the drainage into this environmental protection zone. So I wonder if one of you could address that.
Hi, members of council. My name is Cameron McDougall. I'm with KMBM Incorporated. I'm a hydrogeologist at KMBM. So with regards to drainage, at the site now, there isn't a significant amount of flow through the culvert that drains westward into the PSW in that area. As part of the proposed development, there's going to be no active flow off the site. The proposed ponds will be completely self-contained by berms around both ponds. So the surface water flow regime shouldn't be altered significantly. That was our interpretation you know, as part of our assessment on this file.
Yeah, thanks. So there'll be self-contained ponds, and the increased flow is not significant? Is that your opinion? Do we know what the projected increased flow would be?
Yes, I'm just pulling up the specifics right now.
Thank you.
So as per our report, there's actually a reduction in flow off-site by approximately 82%. Seeing as the current flow on site, flowing off-site to the PSW is negligible, we've attempted to measure flow at the culvert flowing off-site, and there has been no measurable flow. From our understanding, there's obstructions downstream from beaver dams and other natural features. So, you know, changing the flow, reducing the flow off-site from something that's already not flowing off-site isn't going to be a significant change.
So you're saying with expansion of the pit, there'll be an 80% reduction in the flow off-site?
Yeah, so we completed
due to the
this
self-contained ponds that will be constructed as part of the expansion? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's we developed this from a desktop water balance assessment. Mm-hmm. So that's we complete that just by reviewing established relationships between evapotranspiration, infiltration, runoff from various different surfaces at the site. So we take into consideration what is potentially occurring prior to development and what occurs post-development. And through those, those standard assessment functions that we completed, there was a reduction in flow. However, it doesn't always, match what is occurring in the field. In this case, like I said previously, there was no observed flow off-site. So therefore, our pre-development runoff rates, are likely an overestimation of what is actually occurring on site. So again, reducing flow from, something that's already not occurring on site again is a negligible issue. Further, though both extraction ponds, like I said, will be lined with a berm. There will be flow through the berms if these obstructions ever clear downstream. So there will be some flow at the site regardless. It's all a relatively permeable environment. Again, that just leads to the same conclusion that the proposed development isn't going to influence the downstream PSW.
So in expansion, you're digging pits, which will eventually be ponds?
That's correct.
So definitely the transpiration and infiltration, those rates are going to change.
That's correct.
Post-development.
Yeah.
And you've used those calculations to determine that negligible or very low flow should remain the same, if not be reduced by 80%?
Yeah, that's correct. And we account for evaporation directly from the ponds.
Yeah.
And that's how we came up with this reduction of 82% figure.
But then you mentioned obstructions, and so I imagine once whatever is obstructing it, I mean, that's obviously created the wetland, I guess,
Exactly, yeah.
And it's environmentally protected, so I imagine we're not going to be draining that wetland without a big stink. So the flow will remain the same because it's flowing into a wetland? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, the flow, the available surface water flow mapping for the area does indicate that, I don't have a pointer here, but it does flow westwards off-site under a culvert into that PSW. And like you
Sorry,
said,
sorry, PSW, you have to help me.
provincially significant wetland.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah, and exactly as you mentioned before, that PSW is there for a reason. There's natural features that have been in place to develop. I'm not the natural heritage expert. Andrea is here. If we need to go down that road, I'm sure we will.
Okay.
Yes, as I said before, there's not a significant amount of flow through that culvert, and the projections we have here, as I said, this is the third time I'm saying, yeah, this has been reduced by 80% potentially, but again, that is not going to result in a significant influence off-site from our
Okay.
assessment.
So we're talking about flow, but now particulate matter, is that increased because it's a pit?
These ponds are going to allow for settling of any particulates throughout. And then outside of the bermed areas, those are not going to be influenced. Any flow through the berms are going to be filtered through whatever the berm sediments are. If I remember correctly, the berms are just going to be left in place with the existing sediments. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a natural filtration action through there. Even if they are replaced with a different material, there's going to be a natural filtration if water does flow through it. Right. The existing, or upon development, there'll be watercourses. We've discussed that term already today. There'll be watercourses flowing around the northern and western portion of the western extraction area. And those are going to convey waters from undisturbed areas in the western area of the site. Mm-hmm. So particulate influences in the surface water flowing off site, which again is going to be minimal. It's going to be, there's likely. Oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand, and that's why we have wetlands, all right? It has natural filtration, so the particulate question is not particularly apt if it's going into a wetland, I think, but I guess it might be. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my name is Andrea Hicks. I'm a natural heritage expert and ecologist. So as Cam mentioned, there are 2 water courses that run, and they are water courses because they contain flowing water and they are depressions. They have been ditched, though, on this property, so they are very linear. They go along internal roadways, kind of farm roads, along close to the northern property boundary and then down the western side of the site. And those water courses, those reaches, we call them, they are provided with protective setbacks, so development setbacks, to maintain natural vegetative cover that helps address kind of particulate sediment washing. And in addition to that, there's certainly a number of measures for erosion and sediment control around those water courses, things like silt fencing, and other measures during construction when some of the infrastructure is being set up that help protect those surface water features from sedimentation.
Sorry, other questions from other members of council? Councillor Strachan?
I have a question regarding the field work that's been done with respect to species at risk. I don't know if there's any development that's happened since this report was put together and the letter that was provided with the answers or not. So do you have an update as to what the findings have been based on the additional field work, and if there's anything that has been decided as a result of your findings?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so as I believe the letter mentions, there is some ongoing species at risk details that are being worked on with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, so the regulators for the Endangered Species Act. So 2 species that are outstanding are butternut, which is a tree, and Blanding's turtle. So the butternut, we did the assessments that are required by the ministry to assess the health of those trees. And I believe we currently have 1 tree that needs some additional details collected so that the ministry can make a final determination. on whether that tree, it either, it determines whether or not a tree can be removed and compensated under the legislation, or whether the tree needs to be retained and protected with a buffer under the legislation. So there's one tree that we're still working on the final details for that. And then Blanding's turtle, we have collected the additional kind of habitat suitability for nesting for Blanding's turtle that the ministry requested. And based on that information, it doesn't appear that the site has like highly suitable nesting habitat. So that's the information that we're providing back to the ministry to help them allow them to make their final determination on what mitigations or other measures might be required for the site.
Do you know when you would anticipate hearing back from the ministry on this, on those items?
Sorry, through Mr. Chair, I don't know the exact date. I know we have the response prepared. It's often a bit of a black box when things go back into the ministry, but I know that Cornwall Gravel has been working with them pretty closely, and so we're hoping for a pretty quick response, but a quick response could be a month.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Councillor O'Sullivan?
Thank you. So just to follow up then, you can't proceed until you get their response, or do you already know what you would do if you need to make some alterations to the site?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So there are options kind of either way. So the ministry's ultimate determination will be whether we can proceed through appropriate avoidance and mitigation measures on the site development, or whether we would need to proceed through what's called an overall benefit permit, which is a longer process. So at this point, we're anticipating that avoidance and mitigation will be feasible, but we don't have that final determination from the ministry. But regardless, in addition to the approvals that are before council tonight, we have approvals under the Aggregate Resources Act and the Endangered Species Act that need to be achieved or obtained before the site gets developed. So we have to have those approvals before we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'll read the resolution. Oh, yes, Councillor Starkey.
If you'll indulge me, I don't have another question. I just wanted to make a general statement regarding the concern that was raised about pedestrian and cycling traffic. So there are lots of efforts underway to make our community and as a whole, the municipality, more friendly to cyclists and pedestrians as a whole. And I suppose, the one thing that it's easy to evaluate now is that there aren't a lot of cyclists there. We're not necessarily cycle friendly in all places. So one would hope that this is going to change and allow for people who live in rural communities to access those roads safely. So I just would put that as a sort of caveat to the statement that there isn't anything currently existing, and that the intent would be to make sure that we have connections, and South Gore being one of those main connector roads that runs north-south through our community, that could possibly change. So not really a question, just a comment on the response that was provided. Thank you.
Okay then. Be it resolved that Council approve and enact Bylaw 89-21 to adopt the Official Plan Amendment 6 to the Official Plan of the Municipality of North Grenville, to amend Schedule A of the Official Plan to change the land use designation for the subject lands located at Concession 5, part of lots 5 and 6, from rural to mineral aggregate, and to approve and enact Bylaw 90-21 to amend Schedule A4 of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw, Bylaw 50-12, for the lands located at Concession 5, part of lots 5 and 6, Geographic Township of South Gore, to rezone the lands from rural, RU zone, environmental protection, EP zone, and mineral aggregate preservation zone to the mineral extraction pit zone. Do I have, who would like to move that one? I'm looking for a mover. Councillor Starkian, and a second, Councillor O'Sullivan. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Congratulations. Then I'm moving on to the Confirmation Bylaw. Is that right, Jessica?
So I can confirm that we have no correspondence.
Oh, right, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Is there any other business to be addressed this evening? Notice of motions? Your microphone. Your microphone, yes. All of the introduction.
The questions from public and the media. So, no, Paulina? Okay. It says that members of the media in attendance, David Shanahan, is he attending by Facebook, or is he? Oh, I see. So he obviously was not able to attend. Do we have any email questions, or?
I can confirm that we've received no questions by email.
Okay. So now we move on to confirmation bylaw? Yes?
We do, yes.
Okay, all right. I'll read it. Be it resolved that bylaw 103-21 to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on October 13th, 2021, be adopted and passed. Looking for a mover, Councillor O'Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Stracker-Yan. All in favor? Good work. Now, I know this one by heart. A resolution to adjourn. Be resolved that this regular meeting of council adjourn at
8:22?
8:22 p.m. Moved by Councillor O'Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Stracker-Yan. All in favor? Motion carried. Wow. We're done. Thank you so much, Jessica, for your help. Could anything else go wrong at my initial?